Hello, everyone. Welcome to session 8 in our series in partnership with Melanie Herman from the Nonprofit Risk Management Center. Many of you know Melanie. She's one of our champion presenters, and we're thrilled to have her fulfill the 8-part series in our resiliency piece. And I want to express my appreciation and thanks to Melanie for always being here for us and helping us get to that next level of learning. So if you want to go to the next slide, Denise. As usual, I think it's important for us to center for just a moment in preparation for our learning. So I like to do that by reciting the promise, just a reminder of who we are and why we do what we do. It's a promise to ourselves and to the communities we serve. Community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. I just got to say, I love our promise. So I love being able to say that before we get started on our webinar. So thank you, everyone. We have over 100 people registered for the webinar. I don't know how many will get to be on in the moment, but as Denise said, the recording is available for you to review later. And if you have colleagues who registered but aren't able to be on, just let them know that they can access the recording because they did register. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Melanie.
Thank you so much. I'm really thrilled to be here, and it's fun to be wrapping up this series of webinars focused on resilience. And because I run a national organization called the Nonprofit Risk Management Center, we've worked in themes related to risk into all of the sessions as well. So there's been this kind of backdrop of risk management and risk oversight and risk themes throughout the series. You know, one of the things I've noticed in the last couple of years is that resilience, and also I would say the term readiness, right? Almost these two beacons have really come into the spotlight, come to the forefront in the discipline of risk management, but also in the discipline of leadership. You know, as we lead organizations, we need to recognize that we can't always avoid things that might happen to us, things that might be disruptive, right? Things that might be crisis events. And so we need to be both resilient as individuals, but we need to cultivate resilience in the organizations that we serve. So resilience and readiness, two incredibly important themes during or since the pandemic, the global pandemic began. And my guess is that they will be important themes and recurring themes for many, many years to come. So on this first slide of mine, you see my full name and my email address and my phone number. I always like to remind you that you are welcome to give me a call or send me an email with any question you have about topics I talk about today, topics I've spoken about in prior webinars in this series, topics you've heard me talk about in person, or really any risk issue that comes to mind or that pops up in your day-to-day work life that you'd like to just talk to somebody confidentially about. So conversations with me or a member of my team are confidential. There's no cost, so you don't have to worry about that. Our goal is to help you, is to answer your questions, and sometimes just talking out loud with somebody who has a risk background can be very helpful as you try to figure out what solutions, what strategies should I be considering in response to specific situations I find myself in or risks facing my community action agency. So don't hesitate to reach out. And just a reminder that the Nonprofit Risk Management Center is a nonprofit organization that was created 30 years ago to help other nonprofits and public entities really come to grips with risk, right? Get comfortable talking about the what ifs, right? The things that can happen that can be disruptive in the lives of our agencies. And it's been an incredible honor to work with community action agencies for the past 15 years. I always enjoy interacting with community action leaders. And I always enjoy it when I see that the phone is ringing and it's coming from a community action agency. So do reach out to me or a member of my team for questions and follow up. So for this session today, I've broken it down into 3 segments. We're talking about resilient leadership, and you're going to see that I've woven in the word risk in the presentation, right? We're starting out with setting the stage for risk leadership. I could substitute that word risk for resilient, setting the stage for resilient leadership. And I've also woven in risk into the second segment, which is called 8 characteristics of effective risk leaders. And again, we could take out that word risk and put in resilient and really be covering some of the same territory. So don't be put off by the word risk. I know that in community action agencies, it's very rare to find a full-time risk manager. Typically, the executive director of the agency, the chief operating officer, the director of human resources, lots of different people within a community action agency wear leadership hats and also wear risk leadership hats. So don't be put off by that word risk. I've got to weave it into what I'm talking about because that's my discipline, right? That's the area I work in. And then we'll wrap up with some final tips and takeaways. And I like to end every webinar that I present and every workshop I present with some thoughts from books that I've been reading. And I hope that as I have been, you've been reading a lot during the pandemic, that you're kind of tuned in to learning from others. And although I love learning from going to workshops, I find a lot of learning comes from reading books written by thought leaders in different disciplines and trying to apply what I've learned from what I'm reading to the work that I'm doing, as a risk leader, as a consultant, as somebody who runs a nonprofit organization, and as a speaker. So I want to share a few thoughts from 2 books, including one that I just finished last week. It's called Post-Corona, and it was written back or published last August. So in the first year of the global pandemic, but the author has some really interesting thoughts about leadership in the post-Corona world. So let's go ahead and jump into this first topic, which is setting the stage for risk leadership or resilient leadership. What are some things that we want to be thinking about? Well, as a leader in your organization, as somebody who is trying to be resilient yourself and also inspire resilience in your team, and in doing so, create resilience for the agency, that ability to bounce back, I want you to be thinking about these 3 ideas. The first is recognizing that part of the job of a leader is to inspire others to embrace risk, to be willing to take risk. Unfortunately, the risk management discipline gets a bit of a bum rap where people believe that risk management is all about eliminating risk. But the truth is that each of our agencies, and certainly community action agencies, need to take a lot of risk to be successful and to help their communities, right? To address issues related to poverty. You need to take risk in order to achieve your mission. And I think an imperative for today's leaders is to really have that perspective and bring that recognition that risk taking is so important, and be somebody who is seen as somebody who is not overly cautious, but is willing to take risks. Another aspect that I think lends itself to resilient leadership or risk leadership, resilient risk leadership, is this idea of valuing different points of view. It's a very human tendency or trait to want to be right, right? None of us like to be wrong or find that we're wrong about something, we've made a mistake. Nobody celebrates that. But it's so important that we make sure we are surrounded by people who have different points of view. And I use this term diverse perspectives. I'm talking about people who have different backgrounds, right? Whose lives have been different from your own, right? Who bring to your collective table, the table where you talk about challenges and problems, different ideas, right? Different perspectives on the world. Right? So important. And when you bring those diverse perspectives together, you wind up with kind of a mosaic that is very strong. Now, when you bring people with diverse perspectives and opinions and views to the table, you may not get to the solution as quickly as you would if everybody around the table looked like you and had the same background or upbringing, but you'll get to a better solution. So diversity of perspective, diversity of experience, diversity of style, it's really worth the extra effort that it takes. And then the third idea, as we kind of unpack the role of a resilient leader or a resilient risk leader, is that I want you to be thinking about ways that you can help others make risk-aware decisions. At the end of the day, risk management is all about making the best possible decisions in an environment where we don't know how things are going to turn out, right? There's so much uncertainty. None of us know how things are going to turn out. There's no crystal ball available that will tell us when the pandemic will be over, or when that next disruptive event will occur, or even what type of event it will be, right? No one can tell us that with any degree of certainty. And so the best we can hope to do as leaders is to make decisions that take advantage of the best available information, that build on what we've experienced in the past, and lead our missions, lead our agencies through difficult times, through uncertain times, and make those best possible decisions in the moment. And we definitely want to avoid a situation where we say no to things, where we don't do things because we're afraid that things might turn out badly, right? You've probably worked with somebody in your career who refused to or was reluctant to make a move on something unless they were pretty darn certain how things were going to turn out, right? I'm sure you work with somebody now who craves certainty, who wants to know exactly how things turn out, and gets a bit ruffled when things don't turn out as they planned. I encourage you to try to be the type of leader who welcomes surprises, who thinks positively about uncertainty, if that's possible, who's optimistic, and who takes steps and makes plans today so that no matter how things turn out, whether you end up over here or you end up over here, you feel confident you can handle it, right? You'll be ready to go. So just a few things to think about as we get started talking about resilient leadership. So being a resilient leader or being a risk leader, again, I'm using those terms interchangeably as well as kind of paired up. It definitely requires a balancing act, right? You need to be willing to take risks and embrace risks that will help you advance your mission, while avoiding decisions or actions that would put your mission, put your agency in a precarious position, right? Or that would be so dangerous to be disastrous if that event were to happen. So it's always a balancing act. And there's actually another type of balancing act that leaders face on a regular basis. And those of you who are participating today who are CEOs are going to feel, this is going to feel very familiar to you. It's one that all nonprofit CEOs face. And that is balancing between projecting a positive image or projecting positivity, right? Telling people, reassuring people that everything's going to be okay, that we're doing fine, that the agency is healthy, that our team is strong, and everything's going well. There's a balancing act between that portrayal and the reality of what's happening. And so if you're a CEO or an executive director, you know that if you go to a board meeting and you tell your board that the sky is falling down, that everything's going wrong, that there are huge challenges, you've got incredible turnover, you've got unhappy customers. If you go to your board and tell them that, they will try to fix the problem for you, right? It's almost as if you're handing them the problem to solve. And so as a result, many of us tend to err on the side of painting a pretty rosy picture. But I want you to think about this as a balancing act. You want to inspire confidence, you want to inspire commitment and optimism about your agency, but not at the expense of bearing things that are really serious challenges. So a lot of what we do as leaders is walk this tightrope, and there are many different ways to think about this balancing act. And those are just the first that I mentioned on the slide. And then the second, the balancing act that each of us in that CEO role must navigate between being outwardly positive and optimistic and being really truthful about what's happening, right? Being truthful about the concerns, the challenges that our agencies are facing. So I wanted to just ground us a little bit as we talk about resilient leadership and risk leadership. I wanted to ground us with a definition of risk. So I don't know how you're feeling when you hear the word risk, but many people hear the word risk or talk about taking a risk. They think about the potential for things to go terribly wrong. They think about the potential for something to go awry. They think about the potential for loss or harm or even a litigation, right? A lawsuit. But risk is broader than that. I want you to think about it in a broader fashion than that. I want you to think of risk as a future event, action, or even a decision that you make that has the potential to affect a key objective of your agency. And that effect could be either positive or negative. And so when you take a risk, you're doing something or you're experiencing something that could have a significant impact on your agency. And although it says in this definition, adversely or beneficially, the truth is that most risk events or risky decisions have both positive and negative effects, right? So let's just give an example. The decision to mandate COVID-19 vaccinations among staff is a decision that many businesses, many nonprofits have made in recent weeks. And that decision is fraught with risk, right? So many different things could come out of it. And it's hard to fully recognize and fully comprehend and appreciate all of the different outcomes. And in fact, many agencies didn't realize how risky this decision was until they made it, until they announced to their staff that being vaccinated would be required as of a certain date. Well, this is a great example of a risk or a decision with a risky element to it, because we don't know how it's going to turn out. And in almost every case, there will be some challenges as well as some silver linings. And so with a couple of groups that I've been working with who made this decision several weeks ago, they experienced reactions and comments that were very positive. Thank you for doing something to protect our health and well-being. I will feel so much better coming to work knowing that everybody's vaccinated, right? So there's a lot of that positivity and putting the health and welfare of the workforce at the forefront. But there's also been some negativity, right? And pushback from those individuals who previously decided they weren't going to be vaccinated. They didn't want to be vaccinated, who were quite angry at the decision that an employer made. So just as a quick recap, risks are future events, right? If it's happening now, it's just your reality. It's a challenge you're facing. It's not really a risk event. It's not a risk. And risks can affect your agency both adversely or beneficially. And most will affect your agency in both ways. All right, let's talk about 8 characteristics of effective, resilient leaders. So the first characteristic is to be a problem solver. Whether you're a risk leader or a leader in community action, it's serving a more general leadership role. Solving problems is part of the job. And, if you like to solve puzzles, if you kind of approach, if you like to play games and solve puzzles and you like that type of activity in your spare time, leadership is a great role for you. And being able to solve puzzles and problems will help you be more resilient, right? So instead of seeing a challenge facing your agency as a roadblock, as something that gets in your way, you'll approach it as a problem that just needs to be solved. And every problem, every challenge, right? Even the most difficult puzzle can be solved. So I think kind of starting with that mindset that, we're facing something really difficult. For example, let's say that next week you discover that 3 of the members of your management team are all leaving at once, right? Some people will react to that with tremendous disappointment and almost feel paralyzed in the moment. And others, those who are more resilient, will say, I'm disappointed that 3 members of my team are leaving, but I'm excited that they're going on to do something else that maybe they will find more fulfilling, that will be wonderful for their families, for themselves. And here's an amazing opportunity to hire new people who will bring different points of view to the table. And as I describe this scenario, this example of being a problem solver, bringing this problem solving orientation to the table, I'm reminded of a time in my own career when 2 of my staff quit, announced their intent to leave for better jobs, for different jobs. And a 3rd member of my staff was actually in the hospital for 6 months. And I remember sitting at my desk and feeling overwhelmed. What will I do without these 3 people who are part of a small team? How will I continue in this role without these 3 people that I depend on every day? And I really had that moment of being quite paralyzed by these announcements. And I remember asking 2 of the staff, again, the 3rd was in the hospital, but the other 2, I said, can you stay another month? Can you stay 6 weeks? I've almost begged them to stay. And both of them said, we're really sorry, but we have to leave. We've accepted new positions and we're starting in 2 weeks. So they certainly gave me notice, but that happened to me 20 years ago. And since then, after that moment had passed and after I recruited new people to fill those spots, I kind of made a vow to myself not to let that happen again. Not that I could prevent people from leaving, because I certainly don't have the power to do that, but not to let myself get or become paralyzed by departures, and instead to be more celebratory and support people who are leaving and wish them the best and throw them a nice goodbye party, and then set about finding new people with enthusiasm and with optimism. So I'm happy to say that almost without exception, for the past 20 years, I've been able to do that, right? I see those surprises that seem to be downside events at first. I try to see the silver lining in those surprises, and I try to kind of set about or reconstruct the issue that I'm facing as a puzzle, as a challenge that I need to solve, and then go about solving it. So the second characteristic of resilient leaders is what I'm calling the humble listener, right? The leader among us who is willing to really tune into what people are saying, and who wants to learn from everybody around them, right? And who doesn't feel the pressure of having to have all the answers. And I know that each of us has been in this position where we felt that, we're expected to bring the answers to the table, right? Whether it's at the board meeting or at a management team meeting, meeting with our direct reports, that somehow as a leader in this agency, I should have the answers. Well, I read a book 2 years ago by Hal Gregerson, and it's called Questions Are the Answer. And it's a great book. And I had a chance to see Hal Gregerson speak at a conference a few years back. And I was really struck by this idea that great leaders ask great questions, and they ask more questions than they answer. And it's kind of a hallmark of great leadership, is to listen and be willing to ask lots of questions before drawing any conclusions. So I encourage you to try to do more listening, to really adopt a resolution to listen more, because as you listen to different perspectives, you have the benefit of hearing different ideas about how to solve problems. And the more people you talk to, the more ideas you'll have. And in that collection of ideas and sentiments and thoughts, there will be some really compelling, valuable insights. And you just have to be patient to listen as long as you possibly can. You've probably been in this situation. I certainly have been there from time to time, where you're in a meeting, you're in a conversation with others, and you're talking about solving a problem, and somebody says something that strikes you as just a bit off the wall, right? So that their solution is either overly simple or overly complicated, right? Somebody offers up a solution that just sounds a little bit off the wall to you, and you just think, this is not going to work, right? And I've been in that situation where I've discounted that person who offered that suggestion, which I thought was a bit off the wall or didn't make sense, or we've done it before, or that's too expensive, right? Each of us has had that reaction from time to time. So one of the techniques I try to use to kind of cause me to pause in those moments is to ask the question, instead of dismissing an idea that sounds like it won't work, that sounds like it's just not a great solution for the problem. Instead of doing that, I ask the question, tell me more. Or can you tell me how that would work, right? Because sometimes that first idea that somebody expresses is not very articulate, or isn't well thought out, or it just doesn't even make sense on its face. But when you ask somebody to tell you more, sometimes in the unraveling of the idea or in the further, more fulsome explanation of the idea, there's wisdom, right? There's some nugget of wisdom. There's an element in that explanation that you can really use to solve the problem. And it's in those tell me more conversations that I think you sometimes just get the best ideas, right? They're buried in there. It's similar in some ways to when people call us for technical assistance or risk help, we call it, and they call the Nonprofit Risk Management Center. I tell my staff that when that person calls, when you get a call, make sure that you don't try to answer the very first question that you're asked, right? Because that first question is often kind of an opening gambit. It's a bit of a story, it's a bit of an entree, where the true question, the real reason somebody's calling us is not the first thing they say, right? It's something they're going to say in the second or third minute of a conversation. So I tell my team, try to be patient, try to be an active listener, a humble listener, and wait for the story to come out, because eventually you're going to hear the real issue. You're going to hear the real challenge, the real reason somebody's calling you for help. So the third characteristic on my list for resilient leaders is, I'm calling this characteristic committed planner. And essentially, leadership of all forms, it requires, or sometimes quite spur of the moment, right? You're giving somebody guidance as you meet them in the hallway or in a virtual meeting, right? You're giving feedback. It happens every day. So as leaders, there's a lot of spontaneous feedback and dispensing of advice that happens. It's part of leadership. But ultimately, the thing that leaders do well is develop plans and follow plans and inspire people to follow along, right? And to join a group or join a team that will execute a plan. And so we need to be committed planners. I'm sure each of you has worked with somebody in your career who wasn't a very good planner, who was a kind of seat of their pants leader, somebody who just made decisions without giving it a lot of thought, without asking a lot of questions, without developing a plan. And it can be frustrating to work with somebody like that, somebody who isn't committed to thinking things through. The other thing I love about planning and why I think it's so relevant to resilient leadership is that sometimes you'll come up with a plan and then you'll sleep on it. You'll come back to it tomorrow, and you'll realize that you missed something the first time around. You missed something the first time around. What was I thinking when I wrote that yesterday? And actually, this just happened to me this week. So at the beginning of the week, one of my clients asked me to write an article, a 2 or 3 page article that could be sent out to his audit committee as a pre-read before their upcoming meeting. And I'm presenting at this audit committee meeting. He said, I want you to write something that's kind of food for thought. So I wrote something and I almost sent it to him. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to sleep on it. I'm going to put it away and open it back up again tomorrow. And when I opened it back the next day, the following morning, I had so many ideas about how to make it better, right? It was the same document, but I just had a whole different way of thinking about it and improving it. And so when I finally did send out this pre-read document, it was so much better because I let it have some time. I let it marinate, let the concepts marinate. So it looks like we had a question about the book that I just mentioned a few minutes ago. The book is called Questions Are the Answer. and it's by Hal Gregerson. Questions Are the Answer by Hal Gregerson. And Hal Gregerson teaches at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He's on the faculty at MIT. And it's just a great book about asking more questions and getting to better answers by asking better questions. So, great book. All right. So number 4 on my list of characteristics of resilient leaders or of risk leaders is determined advocate. And, as a leader in your agency, you're automatically an advocate. You're an advocate for the mission of the agency. You're an advocate for the programs and services of the agency. And I think you also need to be an advocate for an open mindset, right? Encouraging others to be open-minded about how to solve the most difficult challenges you're facing and how to explore those challenges without fear, right? And how to explore challenges in an environment where it's safe. It's safe to raise your hand and say, I'm really worried about how this might turn out, or I'm really concerned we may not hit these goals, or we may not hit these targets that we've adopted for ourselves with respect to a specific program or service or activity that we're sponsoring. When you're an advocate, you're somebody who, really brings positivity to the table, but at the same time, lets people, you let others know, right? You let the team know, you encourage the team to really focus on those things they're worried about and talk openly about them and work collaboratively to address them, right? So a really important part of risk leadership, which I think is part of resilient leadership, is being open to and being an advocate for contingency planning. Some people worry that if you have a contingency plan, you're poking holes in your main strategy. And in fact, years ago, my daughter and I went to see a comedian give a lecture. And at the end of his lecture, he asked for audience questions. So I jumped at the opportunity to ask a question. And my question was that my daughter had a particular career in mind that she was hoping to be. She wanted to be a writer, and that was her dream, and she hoped to even work in a comedy. But that a member of her family had told her that that was probably impractical and that becoming a successful writer was a bit of a long shot. And he suggested to her that she should go to law school, that she should pick something more practical. And so I thought, what the heck, I'm going to ask this comedian what he thinks about this. And I think in the back of my head, I thought he was going to poke fun at lawyers and make a joke about the legal profession. But he said something that was really interesting. He said that he encouraged my daughter to stick with her original plan for her career. And he said to her, if you keep that backup plan for your career at the forefront, you're going to end up doing that instead of the thing that you really want to do, which is to become a writer. And so it's really interesting advice. Well, I think a slightly different result makes sense in becoming a resilient leader and leading others to be more resilient, inspiring resilience in your agency. I think that you've got to have backup plans. And when you have a backup plan, when you have a contingency plan, when you know that there's a route you can take if your main route is blocked, what that does is inspire others that you're going to get to that destination. You're going to achieve that goal. That if something gets in your way, you have another way to get there, right? And so it doesn't cause people to question whether the plan is any good. It gives them confidence that the organization is going to be successful because it has its primary plan and it has a backup plan, right? It has that secondary route, that second escape route, that option that can be triggered if the first plan or if the first route is not possible. So I think you need to be a determined advocate for the mission of your organization, for the kind of can-do attitude. We can do this. We're so busy. We've got a lot on our plates. So much is expected of us. The demand for our services is going up and up with no end in sight. But you also need to be an advocate for backup planning, for contingency planning. It's okay to have that backup plan, right? All right, so the next characteristic or quality on my list for resilient leaders is trusted confident. Trusted confident. I'm sure you've worked with somebody that you could trust and that who trusted you in return, but I'm sure you've also worked with somebody who wasn't trustworthy. And most of us have encountered that untrustworthy soul in our journey, in our professional journeys. It is so important that you create an environment in your organization where people feel that they can speak up, where everybody feels they can bring their true self to work, right? Their true selves to the workplace. They don't have to hide who they are. And they can, from time to time, speak to you in confidence and tell you things they're concerned about. And that you create this safe place where being honest, being open about your fears and concerns is okay. You know, somebody who says, look, I'm afraid of everything, or I'm afraid of a lot of things, or I'm really, really worried, that we don't dismiss them as somebody, Chicken Little, right? We don't dismiss their fears and worries, that we try to find out as much as we can. We try to understand the fears and worries, and we try to allay those fears and worries by giving them what they need, giving them the support they need, giving them the resources they need to do the work, right? Giving them extra help if that's what they need, and being available to them as somebody who's happy to help them. So I think being a trusted confidant is so important to create this environment of resiliency among the people that you work with, but in the organization. You know, when people are resilient, it leaches into the organization, right? And the organization becomes resilient as well. So I encourage you to be that trusted and trustworthy confidant to others in your agency. You want to be the person they're willing to come to, and they feel like they can tell you anything, right? You're not going to snap at them if they come to you with bad news. You know, one of the questions I love to ask executive directors and CEOs is, you know, how often do people bring you bad news? How often does bad news land on your doorstep? Well, if the answer is never or very infrequently, then you may have a problem, right? Because there's always some bad news happening, right? There's always something that's not going perfectly well in any organization, including any community action agency. But when you as the leader is not receiving information, when you're not receiving information about bad news or things that aren't going well, it might be because people are afraid to tell you the truth. They're afraid to bring bad news. And if that's the case, then people are trying to either sort things out, to fix things, or they may be trying to bury things, right? So that you'll never know that something didn't go well. I want you to figure out a way to flip that and create an environment where everybody knows that it's perfectly okay to come to you and be the bearer of bad news, to be the person offering that warning. And when you receive that bad news or that heads up or that alert that something's not going well or something could go off the rails, I want you to react in a really grateful way and thank that person for bringing it to your attention, and recognize that it takes courage to tell your boss that something's not going well, that we're not going to meet the goal, that we can't live up to the commitments we made in the grant agreement, right? Or those things that we're contracted to do, that things are not going well. You've got to react, you know, as positively as you can and in an encouraging way, so that next piece of bad news will continue to flow to you, and you'll have the opportunity to do something about it versus having to try to discover it after it's been buried. So number 6 on the list of characteristics of resilient leaders is mission devotee. And it's so important. If you want to be a resilient leader and seen as somebody who's resilient, you have to be completely devoted to the mission of your organization. You need to really believe that the organization, that mission is relevant, that mission is needed, and that the organization has the ability to impact people's lives in a really positive way. And to be a mission devotee, something else you need to think about is, you know, am I doing things that constrain the mission? Am I doing things that unnecessarily slow things down? So in risk management, we sometimes call these activities that slow things down, we sometimes refer to them as organizational drag. These are unnecessary rules, policies, practices that cause people to have to do more paperwork than is necessary, or to jump through lots of hoops before they can actually do the real work of the agency. And so, I would encourage you to think about, in your organization, are there things you are doing which cause team members to have to jump through lots of unnecessary hoops, right? The other thing I would ask you to reflect on is, are there things that you are doing as a leader that unnecessarily separate people from the mission of the organization, right? So I'll give you an example. In some agencies, roles are very kind of regimented, and some people are seen as kind of administrative roles, or they are infrastructure type roles, such as information technology, finance, risk management, human resources. They're not the programs and services of the agency, but they're the teams that support the people who are delivering programs and services. And unfortunately, in some organizations, there are almost two classes of employees: those that are doing the mission work and everybody else. And I've been on the team that was in the everybody else group, and it doesn't feel good, right? Even though I was in fundraising and communications and actually ran a membership function at an association that I worked for, I didn't appreciate being told that I was on that other team, right? That I wasn't doing the core work of the organization. I wasn't doing mission work, because I believed that because of what I was doing, the mission was coming to life. So just reflect on this a little bit and ask yourself, have you done anything that might send the wrong message, might send a message suggesting that there are two classes of staff: those that deliver programs and services, that are doing mission work, and those and everybody else, right? There shouldn't be. The theme in your workplace culture, an underpinning of your workplace culture, is that every single person, no matter what they're doing, is supporting the mission and is tied to the mission. When people work in a nonprofit organization and over time feel like they're disconnected from the mission, they tend to lose commitment and enthusiasm, and they become less engaged, and you don't want that to happen. And so as that mission devotee in your agency, you want to make sure that you're showing people at every opportunity available to you how their work fortifies the mission, how their work underpins the mission of the organization. So the next characteristic on my list is first-class communicator. So whether you're a senior leader in your agency, whether you're wearing that risk leader hat, whatever the leadership role is, you need to be able to explain things, right? You need to be able to draft instructions to tell people how to do things, how not to do things, right? You need to be able to show and explain things over and over again. So I think we can all become more resilient and effective leaders by practicing and honing our communication skills, by writing as much as we possibly can, by reading as much as we possibly can, and by really practicing delivering information to many different types of audiences, right? Delivering difficult information, difficult news, by trying to inspire, right? By trying to help people coalesce around a common goal or a common purpose or a new initiative, right? Communication skills are something that each of us needs to work on throughout our careers and really throughout our lives as well. No one is born, with super polished communication skills ready to go in the workplace. Some struggle more than others polishing and honing communication skills, but I promise you, anytime you put into becoming a better writer, becoming a more comfortable and at ease speaker, becoming better at explaining things, any time that you put into your communication skills will serve you well. Because it's not just what you say to people, it's how you say it. If you want to inspire resilience in others and convince others that the mission is alive and well, and that opportunities await and that there's positivity on the horizon, you really need to do that through how you communicate, what you say and how you say it. Every once in a while, when I'm giving an important speech in front of a large group, I do a little rehearsing. It's something that many people who are not comfortable public speaking do a lot of, is rehearsing, kind of practicing. If there's someone you could practice in front of, all the better, right? To get some feedback. Sometimes individuals who really struggle with public speaking prefer to videotape themselves and actually watch back how they come across. But I hope you have people in your life and on your team who will give you really honest feedback about whether the way in which you delivered the information took away from what you were saying, right? Whether there were any mixed messages, whether you were delivering a message about flexibility and empathy and things of that nature, but your delivery was so cold or came across in a way that was cold or formal or stiff, it sort of watered down the potency of the message we're trying to deliver. So we can all work on communications, and every book that I read, every presentation I give, every time I prep for a speaking engagement or write a memo to my board, I'm always thinking of ways to improve the structure of the information as well as the delivery of the information. So we can all work on communication skills, and I urge you to do that, find ways to do that. And then number 8 on my list is CalmConfident Champion. And people look to leaders of community action agencies for sage advice, right? For guidance when we're facing worries, when we're concerned about the future, when we're fretting about uncertainty of not knowing how things are going to turn out. And I really believe that resilient leaders, right, have this calm confidence and the ability to guide people through situations while showing compassion and empathy and still authority, right? So important to really exhibit and demonstrate that calm confidence. And then, keep in mind and remember that a risk leader's words and actions help others feel optimistic, right? And this is true for leaders generally, that people are looking to you for that sense of optimism about the future, confidence that we can do this, right? We're in this together, and yes, we've got lots of challenges, but if we work together and if we're open and honest with one another, then we will be successful in this work. So I'm just looking at the chat and I see there's a comment. Do you think the resistance to admin and fundraising is because they aren't used to private fundraising in a community action agency? So that's a really interesting question. Having a development function, having a fundraising function is still a newish phenomena in community action. Many community action agencies have not had that function, and many are building that capability now, hiring somebody who is in fundraising. I think the bad rap that those of us who are in those infrastructure roles, right? Again, technology, finance, human resources, fundraising, all of those support roles, right? Mission critical, but those infrastructure type roles. I think sometimes the bad rap that we get is often because people don't really know what we do and how we do it. Or sometimes people see us as individuals who are coming up with lots and lots of rules that slow the program people down, right? That create roadblocks for the program people. One way that I've seen agencies tackle this is to make sure that every team in the agency has a chance to tell its story, to tell people what it does and how it does it. And part of that is kind of stripping away the mystery associated with a function, right? It's not magic, what we do in the accounting department or what we do in the fundraising department. Here's how we do it, right? Here's what we do, here's how we do it, and here's why it helps support the mission. But anytime you have a new function, so if development is a new function, a relatively new function in your agency, make sure you provide an opportunity for that team or that leader who leads that function to tell their story, to talk about what they do and how they do it, and share that story with others in the agency. So you kind of dispel the mystery, but you also connect the dots between the work of that function and the mission of the agency. And I would encourage you to do that with all of the infrastructure functions. So interesting point. Thank you for sharing that comment or asking that question about, whether that resistance to the fundraising team is because they're not used to seeing fundraising as part of community action. That may tell part of the story, but I think another part of the story is just lack of understanding of what that function is all about, how it works exactly, and what the focus is. All right, I want to spend the next few minutes with several final tips and takeaways, kind of food for thought as you do some self-reflection and think about how you can become a more resilient leader, and in doing so, inspire resilient leadership in others, but also bring a sense of resilient leadership to your agency and really help to infuse your agency with resilience, which is about the ability to bounce back from those things that you cannot avoid, right? Those events, disruptions, crises that happen despite all of the wonderful things you're doing. And if your mission is important, you need to be committed to bouncing back, because things will happen. I promise you that. All right, the first idea is from the book I mentioned earlier, which is called Post-Corona. It's by Scott Galloway. The subtitle is From Crisis to Opportunity. And this was a book that was recommended by one of my consulting clients. And during our conversation, we were talking about reading, and he mentioned this. And so I ordered it right away. And I really enjoyed it. There's some really interesting insights about this post-corona world. And in one part of the book, Galloway talks about the importance of listening, right? And he says that when we listen to the people we work with, when we listen to our team, when we listen to our employees, we listen to the people doing the work in our agencies, it not only helps us make better decisions because we have more information, we have more insights to draw on, right? More data to use in figuring out what's the right decision, what's the best course of action. He said it also builds trust. And he remarks that, trust is he calls it in scarce quantity during a crisis, that in a crisis, people tend to be less trusting. And when you show that you're willing to listen to others, and when you engage in that active listening, one of the things you're going to accomplish is really inspire trust and build trust, which is so important to anyone in a leadership role. I talked about trust earlier, but really important to recognize that in order for people to trust you, you have to trust them. Right? Trust is a two-way street. So if you have a sense that people don't trust you, or there's a member of your team who's not trusted, you need to encourage them, or you yourself need to kind of dig deep and find ways to be more trusting of others, right? That's how trust develops over time. People will trust you if you trust them back. So this next quote is actually from, as you can see, it's from the author Kurt Vonnegut, but it was actually in a book called Think Again by Adam Grant. Think Again by Adam Grant, a fantastic book. If you're looking for one thing to read to kind of change your thinking and change your perspective on decisions, I would encourage you to check out Think Again. The book is all about being willing to change our minds, being willing to say, you know what, armed with this new information, I think we need to do something differently, right? I think we need to reverse course. We need to change, change our minds. And Grant talks about many leaders hesitating to change their minds because they don't want to be a flip-flopper. They don't want to be seen as someone who's indecisive. But he says when you change your mind, it actually generates respect. People respect when a leader says, I was wrong. I made a mistake. I've decided we need to do things a little differently. We need to, what I said last week, we're going to have to step back from that. And so the quote from Kurt Vonnegut is beautiful. You know, a step backward after making a wrong turn is actually a step in the right direction. And so that theme is brought home beautifully in Think Again. So I encourage you to check out Adam Grant's book, Think Again. And then the last quote or takeaway for today is again from Post-Corona, Scott Galloway's book. And he talks about really the importance of, you know, bringing people together in this soon to be post-corona world. He says, you know, leadership is all about convincing people to work together in pursuit of a common goal. And I think that as someone who's striving to be a resilient leader, and in doing so, really infuse resilience into your organization, it's so critical that you think about, what am I doing to show people that we're here together for a common purpose, that there's a common purpose in community action. And no matter what part of the agency you're working in, no matter what your role or set of tasks and responsibilities are, you're part of that common purpose. And Galloway says this beautifully in Post-Corona, that, you know, this is what real leaders do. This is what truly effective leaders do, is they help galvanize teams around a common purpose or a common goal. So I thought that was a really, really important reminder, and something that I hope you find it as useful food for thought, something to reflect on as you look for ways to really increase your own resilience, your personal resilience, your resilience as a leader, but also, again, inspire others to be resilient, and in doing so, really infuse your agency with greater resilience, because things will happen that you're unable to avoid or forecast or expect. You know, you will be surprised, and the key is to sustain that mission and to keep going, find a way to keep going and even grow, right? We don't want to just survive crisis events or disruptions like COVID-19. We want to be better on the other side. So on this slide, I've got a couple of articles that are featured in our newsletter we call the Risk E-News. They're available on our website. You can go to nonprofitrisk.org and use the search box to find these articles. The first one is called The Leadership Learning Loop, and the second one is called What Star Trek Taught Me About Risk Leadership. And I think you'll find that the tips in these articles are really relevant to leadership, general leadership roles, not just risk leadership roles. I hope you'll check those out. I want to thank you all so much. A quick question, somebody wanted to know about the book by Hal Gregerson. And so I'm going to go ahead and put it in the chat so you all have it. It's called Questions Are the Answer, and it's by Hal Gregerson. And it's a great book, so check it out. But also check out Think Again by Adam Grant. And if you're looking for other ideas, and Post-Corona by Scott Galloway, if you're looking for other reading ideas, never hesitate to reach out to me, because I'm always reading something and trying to learn as much as I can from everything I read. So I'm always happy to share with you my reading suggestions. We also have a section on our website under the resources tab where we have infographics, and we have several infographics that are just lists of favorite books, things that I've loved reading, and things that books that members of my team have loved as well. So thank you so much. I'm going to turn it back over to Denise, and thanks for being part of the program today. I hope that I've shared some interesting, thought-provoking ideas about increasing your own resilience and building resilience in your agency. And I also hope that you'll reach out to me if you have questions about anything that I've said, or questions about risk issues, resilience issues generally. I would love to hear from you. So back to you, Denise.
Thank you. One second here. Thanks so much again for your excellent and valuable information today. And also to those who were able to attend, if you could advance the slide to, yes, that's the correct one. The partnership is promoting a leadership coaching and technical assistance opportunity, and we encourage executive directors and other leaders to sign up with that, and I'll post the link in the chat. Go. technical difficulty there. Also, if you need to contact anyone for more information or questions, you can contact us here with Erin Wicks or Lana Show. And also, before we close, I want to let you know that we do appreciate your feedback, and there's going to be a brief survey at the close of the webinar that should automatically pop up in a browser. And I'll also post that here in the chat as well. And we appreciate your attendance, and you all have a great day.